Hey everybody, welcome to Maddox AI and Post Sales Summit. You are currently in the prep for customer call session. You might have noticed it looks like we have two John Garcias. We in fact don't. We have one John Garcia and one Rob Zambito. But before I go into introductions, just a reminder that if you have any questions at any point in the session, feel free to drop it into the chat or Q&A, and we will make sure to answer them before the session ends. So I'm going to go ahead and we have Rob Zambito. Rob, if you don't mind waving to the screen, who is founder and CEO of Success Scaled Consulting. And we also have John Garcia. John, if you don't mind waving as well, founder of Globally, as well as sales and AI SME at Success Scaled. So, one of our traditions for our sessions is we start with an icebreaker question. So, for both you, John, and Rob, what's one AI use case you wish existed but haven't seen yet?
Yeah, I can kick that off. Thanks, Bex, and thanks for organizing this whole thing. I mean, this has been such a pleasure to be a part of, and I appreciate all that you and the Matic team do to drive innovation in the field. Um, for me, it's something I've been working for the last like 6 weeks. I've been going through several years of monthly churn data with a client, and I would love if AI could act as a proper social scientist and data scientist when looking at that churn data. Um, there's been a lot of hallucinations. I'll put it that way. Um, but John has one as well that's a little bit more funny.
Yeah, I was just chatting about it with Bex a second ago. I'm actually working remotely. It'd be great if I could just say, "Hey, Claude, do you have a skill for helping me move?" That's more on the personal side, but yeah.
I definitely feel like everyone could use that when they're in the process of moving, for sure. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Rob and John.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it away from here. And let me go ahead and share my screen. You guys all see this, all right?
Yep.
Cool. So super stoked for this presentation because we've had a recent breakthrough. But to get there, I want to tell you about a real problem I had just recently. This is a fully true story, much like your everyday CSM. I'll give more background on me in a second, but my workflows are very similar to that of a CSM. Back-to-back meetings, no time in between, no time to prep, coming up for an expansion call. And what do I need is good discovery. And I think to myself, oh, great, I have a tool for this now. And then I look at and I want to tell you, so what I expected when I looked at this tool, first time using it, is this high EQ briefing that tells me, okay, here's what matters for this specific call, this specific person, given my specific relationship history. Here's how to connect with them at a deeper human level. Quick background on me with regard to social sciences. Like my background is in consumer psychology before I ever got into customer success. And so I really value that kind of thing. But this is what I got. I got this is a pre-read, wrong time zone. I'm in Eastern time. What was discussed, personal catch up, San Francisco meetup, Kelsey's ramp. And I'm like, oh my God, I am in no position to handle this conversation. So we set out to build something bigger. But let me just tell you a quick lay of the land. I work with customer success teams. John and I work with customer success teams all day, every day. And being in customer success is really hard. I've been there myself. I've worked in customer success for 11 years. I've never not worked in a customer facing role since I was a waiter at a diner when I was a kid. You're dealing with all these different tensions between all these different parties in customer success. And the way it's showing up now is that there's two big pressures between the pressure to own revenue and this newfangled AI mandate that's being slapped on us in customer success. But there's still this pressure to be human and do good discovery and be a good strategic customer leader. And to me, that shows up at that exact point in time where you're doing a pre-call preparation, pre-call brief. So we tried tons of options. This one didn't work. It was bland. There were others that were bloated. There were others that were broken. There were others that were expensive. Getting hit with a paywall. Could you imagine getting hit with a paywall when you're about to go into a customer call? The most infuriating thing. Some were just wrong. Some just didn't exist entirely. And then I got the wonderful advice, oh, just ask Claude. Now, I want to just take as a brief moment for the audience. I think people can contribute in the chat here. If you can't, just at least just pull out a piece of paper and jot something down. Why does this obviously not very good advice not work? What are the limitations that come to mind? Oh, Felicia's in the chat. Hey, Felicia. Felicia's a good friend. Oh, speaking of which, a good friend based in New York. So I gotta put this
Let's not start
data
fights
sources.
today.
Data sources have to be connected. If you've been in this game for a while, you would know that there's no context, there's no connections, there's no specific outputs, there's no harness around the model. A model alone is not going to give you the output that you're looking for. But could we do better? Quick background on Success Scaled. We do three things at Success Scaled. Success Scaled is a company I founded, I started on the side about 6 years ago to do customer success consulting. We've expanded to Talent Scaled, where we help people find jobs. I love this part of the business across all go-to-market, and then System Scaled. The underpinning of all of this is AI Scaled. It's our brand that we're launching that's serving. We've worked with about 45 or so customers at this point. But I want to share more about John because John is the underdog story that I least expected, starting with the fact that there's a fun story about when John and I met. John, you want to tell him the fun fact about when we first met and then give a little background on you?
Yeah, so initially I met Rob back when we were both working at Qualia. I was on the sales team. Rob was in the CS side. We initially were not as close as we are now. Rob, you can tell it pretty honestly. We how do you say it?
Well, that we hated each other.
Yeah, exactly. So, but now we work really well together, and so yeah, so I've been in sales for about a decade, and um, in this story, I arrived to Rob ramping and trying to help more on sales coaching and some other stuff. That's initially how I arrived here. I'll let Rob continue.
The key thing to realize is like John is an underdog here because John has no background in coding. John has no background in AI. John is just a career AE, not just a career AE, but why is he the one who built our AI? Because much like the Knicks, he is the underdog story that you can embody yourselves. He just saw a problem and figured out how to solve it. And we're actually in the process of building 5 different tools. We're going to focus on the first one for the remainder of our time today, between pre-call briefs, scheduling tools, email triage, style and voice tools, and then the coolest one that I'm really excited about is real-time coaching. So like if you're on a call, you can get coaching live. So I want to dive in now to just how we built this. Imagine you had a great coach virtually and you're prepping for a customer call. What would a coach tell you? They would not just tell you who the customer is, but if you'd like to chime in the chat, what other information would you need? And while you type there, I want you to realize a key lesson here is that Claude or ChatGPT or whatever AI of choice you're using is only going to be as good as the outputs that you design for
Great
it.
point.
Background info with account and contact. How about what is value to them? What was said on the last call? What's open and unresolved? The purpose of the meeting, top discovery questions to deepen the conversation, and recommended outcomes and next steps. Like these things take time to prepare, but it would be great if you have all these served up on a silver platter. So we're going to dive in now to the technical side. John, tell them about V1.
Yeah, so V1, um, we were trying to address the brief, and it seemed like something that'd be really simple. Those questions Rob asked, they take thinking, but they're not necessarily hard to answer if you have all the data. But as you can see here, this is a web from make.com. At the very center, that icon is Claude, and it's trying to talk to a lot of things. We've got Notion to the left in the black. We've got Gmail. Those are the red one right next to it to the right. We've got Google Calendar at the top in blue. You've got Slack to the far right in purple. And then you've got one of our call recorders, because we do have two, and there is a reason, down there in the red triangle. And then at the bottom, you've got an orange one, which was HubSpot. So all of these systems really good at what they do on their own. In theory, they all have connections, they all have integrations, and they could all supposedly, in one way or another, talk to Claude, but that looked like that web. So this is what ended up coming out. Uh, Rob, do you want to cover some of it and I'll cover some too?
Yeah, I think like the key thing that we learned is like some worked, some didn't. Like everything worked in isolation and it was possible to pull basic information between systems, but you can see from this example here, there were several issues between data gaps, there were integration failures as well. The key thing to note from that last slide is we tried to link that all together through make.com. There were AI inference failures, and then there were also significant costs associated, which was less than ideal. What John said was it inferred the solution I wanted instead of correctly working the actual problem I was trying to solve. And I thought that was so interesting and insightful, especially for those of us in customer success who are so accustomed to dealing with value problems just like this. John, did you want to share any more about the limitations?
Yeah, I can go through these each one real quick, one at a time real quick. So it assumed my limitations because I told it I didn't know to code. It didn't stop to think, okay, are there other ways that Claude could be used or another tool could be used to bridge that gap? It inferred that we had to stick with the current tool stack that we had instead of seeing, you know, is that necessary? Which is that third point. Did it stop to think, is there a better way? Or was it just trying to force us to solve with what we had and what it thought I could only do? So,
And there were a lot of key takeaways, right? The main one being we learned we had to mistrust Claude by default. And that's so different from this idea of quote unquote just ask Claude, right? The things that you may learn from our experience, so you don't have to, is to design with the end in mind, as I mentioned before, to question the assumptions that Claude is making and budget ample time as if Claude is doing discovery on you. Have Claude confirm its understanding before it starts. It's laborious to keep a human in the loop constantly, but it would have saved us so much time in the long run. It's one of those slow is fast and fast is slow moments. And then also sprint blocks, I think were interesting. I think one of the interesting things John did that we're going to share more is like literally to keep a human in the loop, set an alarm for all throughout the night to keep waking up, checking, approving, going back to sleep, waking up, checking, approving, and going back to sleep. It reminds me of my early support days when I used to do that for customer support when I was on the West Coast serving East Coast customers at 5 a.m. It was not pretty. The question then became, how do we teach it judgment, right? We realized this wasn't going to work. It didn't work. Because if you go back, this is not very good. It's not usable. So how do we teach it judgment? And like, this is a real screen grab from my calendar. And it's pretty busy and messy. Like, what do you see here? You see there's internal and external meetings. So Claude had to learn to judge between those. The meeting types are also different, right? If you're running a QBR versus a renewal versus an upsell, those meeting types are going to follow different things. And while the common ground through all of them, or almost all of them, should be good customer discovery, the meeting type is going to vary. So, John, talk about a little bit more about what didn't work, the learnings, and then just how to think about this more generally.
yeah, so we all have, like Rob mentioned, our calendars carry a lot. Um, it had to distinguish different things. And the judgment, the big takeaway was what is the easiest way to identify what's worth a brief? Well, is this an internal meeting? What's our domain? Does this even have attendees? Then it's not even a meeting. It could just be a reminder. And to get to that point, you'll see here in the yellow section under learnings, a pre-mortem was used. So a pre-mortem does two things at once. Just don't over pre-mortem because that can also be too much of a good thing. But it will assume all the ways something could fail and then automatically plan how to address them. And then you, as the human, would step in, review, and approve. So that's how we taught it judgment.
Which was quite difficult. And then the question became, how do we rebuild like the Knicks, not like the Jets? If you're not a sports fan, I apologize, but just know that there's a right way to rebuild and a not right way to rebuild. There's a better analogy that John and I found in here too, which is actually a kitchen analogy. So we strung together this different setup And John, I'd love you to walk through just like what we changed,
Sure.
and then we'll get into what didn't work and what didn't.
Sure. So we also, idea on time frame. I rebuilt all of this in about 2 days. Some of it a lot overnight, like Rob said, setting alarms to wake myself up at 4:30 in the morning and come in and check on it. But we rebuilt a sturdier, more streamlined version of this using GitHub, Netlify, and cron tools, which at first I didn't understand. Again, I'm not a coder. But what you're going to see here on the left, I'll walk you through very quickly. We're going to use the kitchen analogy. It should work. Starting at the top, here's just some foundational knowledge. A cron is just essentially a scheduled task. All of the code that we created lives in GitHub. GitHub then sends the code automatically to Netlify. Netlify is honestly what does the work, and we'll explain that in the next slide. But as far as the meeting briefs, here's how that flow works. So starting with this kitchen analogy, the cron function fires every 15 minutes to keep an eye on Rob's calendar. So that's your expediter looking at the tickets. Then here's a ticket. It's checking the calendar. Here's a meeting in 1 hour. Next, is this actually a meeting? If not, that red box to the right, maybe it's a reminder. Maybe it's travel. But if it is, it's going to realize that it has attendees. Are those attendees within our organization or out of our organization? Then it sends it to the kitchen. The kitchen is going to be our two call recorders, which again we have for a reason. We got Ask Elephant and Spiky. Prep cooks working and working with the pantry, which is our data sources. So HubSpot, which is our CRM, and Airtable, which supports all the data that HubSpot just isn't built to handle. That's the pantry. So all these ingredients and cooks come, hand over stuff to the chef, which is Claude's API. So we're not using Claude Web Chat or projects. It sends it to the API. Cloud API system chef puts together, gives the food the plate over to Slack via a webhook, and then since it's been served, the ticket gets taken off. It gets put on that little spiky thing so you don't make another one, and that is essentially all of us getting logged and sent back to Airtable to make sure no dupes happen.
I just want to take a moment of pause here because if you just listen to that and it sounded technical and beyond you, it's actually largely not. That's what we thought. That's what we thought. And it was a really insightful moment to realize there is a way here. And it was funny because we didn't always fully understand what we were doing. Like if I make a call with my phone, I don't understand the mechanism by which my voice actually gets to the other person on the other end of the line. It doesn't stop me from using it. But the interesting thing here is this actually breaks down quite simply when you can think of it in simple analogies like this. The there were limitations, right? I mean, this wasn't perfect. Token limit, spent a good bit of money on that. I told you about setting alarms in the middle of the night to keep the human in the loop. But I think the key takeaways here are like, first of all, don't be afraid to restart. So we had something pretty articulated built previously, but don't be afraid to restart, questioning the original assumptions you made. A lot of times, the leaner the solution is might be better. This is net leaner than what we had before. There were cool things we tried too, like using different persona skills. And we also realized that we had to up our seats. Um, there's a lot more that we could talk about with regard to like what it means to be entering this token-based, consumption-based economy. But rather than talk to you about the economics of this, I do think it's really interesting to tell you that there was a funny plot twist in all of this. I'll share that and then we'll wrap up. John, tell
Cool.
me about the plot twist.
Yeah. So again, I'm not a coder. In V2, to boil this really, really, to boil this really down, what ended up happening was I enabled the Claude Chrome extension. I started working with Claude and basically tried to remove the things that were causing the most bugs and errors. And that, in this instance, for what we were trying to do was Notion and Make. Could we then make this work easier, different ways? So this kind of goes back to the personas. I told Claude, imagine, instead of just me and you working on this, imagine I have a Stanford grad who is a product engineer, an AI engineer, or an AI expert, and an actual like software engineer, what would they say? After going through some of the answers, we ended up where it would tell me as a human, what do I need to click, save, click here, push here, move this file here. And it largely took over. And we arrived with this new architecture where there's not a single MCP in anything that runs here. Everything goes from GitHub's code that Claude generated based off of me explaining strategy pushes to Netlify. Netlify runs everything through REST API calls. So Netlify reaches out to Google Calendar, HubSpot, Airtable, Claude's API, Slack, and does it all via code. So V1, we didn't want to code, and I don't know how to code. Turns out when I look at GitHub now, we've got mountains of code. So yeah.
which was fascinating and gave us a degree of pause, but honestly, fascinating because the output, it worked. It actually worked. Like this was an example of an upsell in action. We delivered a clear recap. There was a good reminder. There were smart value questions that helped me engage this client on a pretty human level. There was nice multi-threading around other stakeholders. It showed up also in the form of risk management. So now you can see this judgment layer in action, which is super cool. Like there was a read on the client situation. There's also a good catch around systems access that a CSM needed, good foresight into what's to come next. And this was all just so much better than anything that I was going to do in my 10 seconds that I try to squeeze for a bio break between meetings. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up here. If you're a CSM today, you've really been through it. It's been a hard few years. This is meant to make your life easier and lighter and help you connect at a deeper level. And there's more that we're trying to build around that too. Like we're trying to work together better as a team where like we've been working on this inbox triage solution as well that tells us what's going on in our inboxes. I actually am able to cancel a subscription that I was paying for now because that was doing this. There's also, John, you could probably share a quick second on
Yeah.
some of this real-time coaching that we're working on too.
Sure. Since I know people are going to ask why we have two call recorders, this partially answers that. Um, the primary use case in this workflow, not for everything that we're doing, but in this workflow, Spikey has a very unique ability to be live in a call. So what you're seeing here in the farthermost to the left screen is the person that was just speaking spoke for quite a while, and it's making it pause. It's telling or actually, that's the middle one. The left one is saying, hey, prospect just discussed current challenges. Here's some key points. So it's recapping things for you. So if someone's going through a long explanation, you can pause, recap, agree that you're still aligned, and this will help you condense that. The middle one is an alert. All right, hey, 3 minutes have happened since the call started. There's been some nice rapport building, but have you set an agenda yet? The next one is more CSM specific related, which is, hey, the customer just mentioned an adoption struggle, right? When we're in a call, sometimes things might accidentally fly by us. It's a lot to consider all at once. Now you've got some assistance here saying, okay, wait, hold on a second. You just mentioned an adoption struggle and then some ideas on talking points. So this is the live call help. And that's why in this workflow, use Spiky. We use Ask Elephant for a bunch of other amazing things it can do as well, more pertaining to HubSpot.
Very cool. For me, this is gold. Not only from the level of being a CS person my whole career, except for when I worked the kitchen in a diner. It's a different story for another time. But not only as a CS person is this gold for me, but as a consultant who's basically, I always say my job is just being a CSM to CSMs, and also for someone who's now managing a team. As I scale my team and those of us who are in this room, this virtual room, who are scaling their teams, you probably want ways to manage your team at scale and coach them well. I heard Chad's presentation a little bit earlier on this. This is all a scalable way to do that. So like I said, we're working on these 5 things: pre-call briefs, scheduling, email triage, got a preview there, style and voice, real-time coaching, got a preview there. But there's a lot that you can do today. There's a lot that just boils down to pick one painful problem, pre-mortem before you build. Try to use that room full of experts that we described so that you can level up how you engage with AI. Design for cost. Please don't break the bank. Be the human in the loop and then audit your stack as well. So that's it. We've had a lot of fun building this and we got a lot more to do. Does anyone have any questions from the audience we can help answer?
Yes, and as a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, drop it in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll make sure it gets asked. First question is around the QA process, especially with, the LLMs hallucinating. How did you tackle that?
John, let's hear it.
Yeah, so that's something that was found out. What ended up happening was everything lives in a project, obviously with context documents, but then shifting to a V2 project where, okay, let's not let's not have you refer to everything. So a V1 context doc within a V2 project so that it understands what didn't work, new V2 context docs, and then breaking it into sprints so that there's no hallucinations and errors. We're going to break this into tiny little things I can monitor. And then I just work in sprints and be the human in the loop.
This question is for John. As someone with no coding experience, how easy or difficult was it to troubleshoot things?
V1, incredibly difficult. Um, Learned so much. V2, much more easy because of, again, of the sprints. And then once I wrap my head around, oh, okay, this is actually just coding and realizing and feeling a bit empowered that I can code in theory, then I would have ownership of, okay, we talked about this here. That means the code must live somewhere around here. Hey, Claude, can you help me? Here's a problem. I think it's here. Am I wrong? And again, using that room of experts so that in theory, when I'm doing all this, I use that skill so that I've got a product engineer, an AI master, and an actual, I've got those experts behind me in theory through Claude working the problem.
Cool. Well, that is it for the questions that came through. Thank you so much, Rob and John, for joining us and walking us through what I think is a use case everyone wants to do and figure out. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of agents creating prep for customer calls after the end of today. Just a reminder for all our attendees, the recording of this session will be available tomorrow in our resource hub. We'll make sure all summit attendees will be notified when that hub is live. So if you want to pop up that recording and work alongside Rob and John in the past as you're setting it up for today, you'll be able to do so. So thank you again, Rob and John, for what was an amazing session. And thank you to everyone else for attending. Hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Bye.
Bex, thank you. I have a meeting to prep.
Bye, guys.
See you later.